Thank you for joining us for another episode of Attribution Nation. In our new series, the one we're in right now, we're stepping into the C-suite to hear directly from CMOs and other marketing leaders navigating today's most complex marketing challenges. From AI disruption to the age-old alignment battles with sales and marketing, we'll unpack the real reporting and data problems leaders are solving for today and the ones that are keeping them up at night still. So join us for candid conversations that go beyond metrics into the strategies, experiments, and lessons shaping the future of marketing leadership. And I am joined on today's episode by Marni Puente, who is the SVP and Chief Marketing Officer at SAIC. And we're going to talk a little bit about Marni's path into CMO, but also Marni has to solve for a really unique challenge that we haven't talked about yet in this podcast, which is the challenges related to B2G, business to government marketing, and her approach to building brand and measuring the impacts of the marketing that she's doing. So Marni, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Happy to be here, Drew.
So tell us a little bit about your career path. How did you get into marketing and how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I've had a pretty roundabout career path. When I was 18, I thought I'd be a performer, a musician, like my mom. So I really focused in my undergrad studies at Johns Hopkins on communication and the arts. And then I merged my love for both by interning at the press office of the Kennedy Center, which is when I really started to kind of focus more on PR and marketing. And then spending 7 years at the Smithsonian in both marketing and PR. And then it was later when I decided, yes, I definitely wanted to go this route, that I went on to pursue my graduate degree in marketing in my late 20s. And then upon graduation, I went into marketing in the private sector and honestly never looked back. So it wasn't, at 18, I thought I'd be a performer, right? And then going through this process and kind of keeping an open mind, I was able to really merge my love for creativity, the arts, and my strengths and really, let that inform my career trajectory in marketing.
Okay, so now I have to ask the question, which musical instrument did you play or instruments?
Yes, you may see it in the background. So my mom was actually a classical pianist and accompanied opera singer. So I got into music at a young age. I chose, of course, the largest instrument in the orchestra, which is the harp, and you might be able to see it in my background here. I don't play as much as I would like anymore because I have a very busy, as you can imagine, full-time job and 2 kids to raise as well. But yes, I think one of the things I love about marketing is the focus, on the discipline, the creativity, the things that I learned growing up in the arts have really translated over to my career in marketing as well.
That's awesome. You might be the first person I've ever met that plays the harp. That's really cool.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I know a lot of marketers that come from various creative backgrounds that weren't necessarily, their goal wasn't to get into marketing. And then, 5, right. 10, 15 years down the road, here they are. They've been in marketing for a long time and it ended up being their career. Yeah. So it's an interesting little career path, how some people navigate their way in. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing today at SAIC.
Yeah. So, one of the things, and just kind of building on why marketing and why me, I think in addition to the creativity, and then how I'm bringing this forward with SAIC is marketing. When you think about it, it's all about the things that I'm really, I think, strong at: communications, psychology, influencing, right? I consider myself to be an innovator. According to the Strengths Finder, I'm an achiever, strategic, lifelong learner, and communicative. And I also love leading and mentoring people. So the role of the CMO is a good fit based on these qualities. When I was approached about the opportunity at SAIC, I actually wasn't looking. I was very passionate about my previous role. I led marketing and AI digital innovation at a complex Fortune 100 company. Absolutely love my job. I was focused on marketing, emerging tech, doing just some really cool out-of-the-box things with AI, VR, immersive, experiential marketing, etc. However, the CMO position at SAIC, when I was approached about it, was really intriguing to me because it kind of brought my passions for both business to government, B2G, with commercial, where I've spent the last 7-8 years of my career, in seeing how much opportunity and white space there is in B2G marketing, and to bring commercial best practices into B2G and really use that as a differentiator, which also is very timely with this current administration, which is very focused on commercial service offerings and best practices. And I absolutely adore my CEO, Tony Towns-Whitley, who came from Microsoft, where she led the highly regulated businesses and saw this gap in marketing. And so when I interviewed with her, it sort of sealed the deal, because I just loved her vision for the company, where it's headed, and the important role that marketing has to fill, not just from a brand perspective, but as a driver of growth, which I think is sometimes forgotten. So this idea of building and serving as a startup in a Fortune 500 company really excited me. And I see the same excitement amongst my teams, and just this opportunity to bring both exceptional B2G marketers as well as B2B that I've met throughout my entire 37-year career to SAIC has been really phenomenal. And I'm really proud of what we built.
That's awesome. That's very cool. That's very cool. Now, SAIC, as we mentioned, you sell into the government, which is a very different proposition to selling either to consumers or businesses. So when you think about the challenges that you've had to, or differences that you've had to account for, and challenges you've faced moving from a B2C and B2B motion to a B2G motion, right, what are some of those differences and challenges that you've had to account for and kind of work through?
Yeah, I love this question, because it's both a constraint and an opportunity, as the way I see it. And I'm always one to take on a good challenge. I've never taken the easy path. So I always say that B2B is about 5 years behind B2C, and that's kind of a well-known fact in the CMO community. B2G is at least 3 to 5 years behind B2G. And so B2B, sorry. So what I love about B2G is the sky's the limit. And this really became apparent to me. I went to, shortly after I came back to B2G, after being on the commercial side for 7-8 years, attended one of our big trade shows, right? Government trade shows. And I was like, wow, it's just the sea of sameness. There's so much opportunity here. Having been at, the Consumer Electronics Show, South by Southwest, doing some really cool out-of-the-box marketing on the commercial side. Wow, what a great opportunity to bring that. But it is very different, right? And there are challenges. We have certain requirements. We're very highly regulated. And there's just certain things you can't do in a highly regulated industry. Plus, we've seen budget cuts in government contracts recently, as I'm sure you're all too aware. But rather than seeing these as obstacles, I prefer to see them as opportunities to do more with less and be creative. I am a very, very strong believer that necessity is the mother of invention. And we're seeing that more in government contracting than ever before. And I think bringing some of these commercial best practices to government contracting not only aligns with this current administration's thinking, but it's also a huge competitive advantage for us. So it's been pretty exciting to see this, to really take the lead on this in the government contracting space and see it take off.
So you mentioned some things that you just can't do when marketing to B2G. What are some of those things that, like, I used to be able to do these and now we can't do this?
There's a lot of red tape. With its current administration, there's less so in some ways, and I think what's been helpful is they're starting to procure more like commercial organizations, kind of moving away from the traditional RFP process into more OTAs and thinking more like commercial. So that's helpful, especially because I've got a really robust B2B marketing team. But yes, there are challenges, particularly as we think about in the intelligence space, right? They're harder to reach, and it's much harder to get client testimonials and use cases, customer success stories in the government space than it is, for instance, in commercial. The other thing that traditionally government contracting, where I would say a little behind in terms of certainly B2C, but even B2B, is there's a lot of focus on these, what I call top of funnel activities, if you know the marketing funnel. And I think of those as one to many. So broad advertising, trade shows, PR, media, reaching the masses. And what B2B and B2C in particular have really mastered that I'm trying to really bring into B2G is more of the kind of one to few, one to one. So we start to move down funnel, introducing programs like account-based marketing. We call it customer-centric marketing, deal-based marketing, really focus on our solutions and services, and taking just a much more customer-centric approach to marketing. So what I'm seeing is by bringing in these commercial, we'll call it marketing capabilities, we're able to drive growth and tie directly to profitability. And that's been a huge competitive advantage. And it also doesn't take, lots of money. And that's a challenge right now with GovCon. We've had budget constraints. We have, the needs for efficiency. So what's been great, I think, about this is we're doing a lot more one-to-one marketing with our government customers instead of the broad brush approach. And this really gives us a competitive advantage, and it enables us to better connect marketing activities to profitability.
That's super interesting. I spent a little time marketing to government as well, and it was very interesting how, some of the marketing tactics that we had used previously. Now, I did this years and years and years ago, way before a lot of the modern technology, but there were certain things that you couldn't do. Like you can't just like pick up a phone and call a general to try to sell them stuff. Like you just can't do that. You can't just email somebody that's, in a decision-making position inside the CIA and it's going to get through. Like that email is never going to make it to that person. So it's so much harder to get your brand in front of folks that it kind of, in some ways, it kind of puts some handcuffs on marketers. Yeah. So what are some of the creative things that you guys have done to kind of, get around some of those limitations and still get your brand in front of people?
Yeah, no, that's such a great point. And look, I've been in this industry for 30 years, B2G for a long time, and then B2B most recently. But coming back to B2G now after being off of it for the last 8 to 10 years, where I see the huge advantage now, kind of to your point, is, digital marketing has gone so far, right? So collaboration, so definitely a focus on digital marketing. I talked about one to few and one to many. So we do very much promotion and particularly through our customer-centric marketing efforts to kind of lay out who are those top buyers we're trying to nurture and ways of reaching them. And sometimes it's through our account teams one-on-one and prepping them with what they need to know to build customer intimacy and map out what those touch points are. Another way is just digital marketing. It's huge, right? We can do a lot. We can reach out to them on LinkedIn. There's so much more at our disposal now than there used to be. And then I think, while we are, like I said, limited to a certain degree in terms of customer use cases, because we know that's like marketing gold. Like everyone wants to know, they want to hear from their peers. They want to know, where else have you done it and what does success look like? It's very hard, as I mentioned earlier, and all too well, to get testimonials, right, from government customers and create kind of use cases and get those approved by government. So there are ways to get around that, leveraging third-party vendors. And so we definitely look at that. So we have to just be really extra creative. Often I say, man, stepping into a Fortune 100 commercial company as a CMO is almost easy compared to some of the stuff we go through in GovCon, between the budget constraints and some of the red tape and everything you mentioned earlier. But it also makes it that much more rewarding. But there are a number of things that are at our disposal now that do make it much easier. And we just have to really continuously be very, very creative in terms of how we approach it.
So, and this is just such this is more just my personal curiosity. Do most of the people that are buying within the government, are they on LinkedIn? Do they have a LinkedIn presence?
100%. 100%.
Okay.
See, and that's what I mean. Like, I think the advent of digital marketing, I mean, I worked for a large government contractor 15 years ago. And it was when social media and honestly, even websites, like even needing to have a website was like a thing, right? Now it's more about AI, which is a whole other area I'm passionate about and happy to talk about. But yeah, so those are table stakes right now. And so some of these things that we're doing they're table stakes in B2B, but they're still fairly new for B2G. And so yes, so we can do very targeted one-to-one outreach to our buyers, whether it's deal-based marketing, account-based marketing, what have you, to be able to reach those buyers where they're at with and this is thanks to AI too, hyper personalized, tailored messaging to those buyers as well. So those are the things that didn't exist, 10 years ago, that we now have at our disposal, which definitely makes it easier. Are there still challenges? 100% there are. Can't do as much in commercial, but I think taking some of the commercial best practices and being really creative about how we try to deploy them in government contracting, we've been pretty successful.
Okay. Yeah. Super interesting. I don't know why I thought that, like, why would a general have a LinkedIn? But I mean, I guess it makes sense that they do. Yeah. I guess it makes sense. Yep. With some of the unique challenges that you have with just reaching your buyers in this market, I'm assuming you probably have some unique challenges around marketing measurement as well. So talk a little bit about, do you have some unique challenges that you've had to solve for? And if so, what were they?
Yeah, I would say it's more, not so much the challenges in measurement. I would say it's more, again, B2G sometimes being a laggard in terms of B2B and certainly B2C. I mean, they have to, right? Because there's so much focus on front office, customer service, and direct selling. It's more transactional. With us, it's much more relationship based, but we are looking at KPIs. So I'm all about data, first of all, using it to inform marketing efforts. So for instance, with our recent brand refresh, and this is where AI is so tremendously helpful. I conducted extensive market research, both qualitative and quantitative, but for the quant part, leveraged AI to analyze over 600,000 data points to inform SAIC's new brand. Now, this would not have been possible. This would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars and taken months. We did it in weeks, thanks to AI. Data and research are also so important. Otherwise, you're shooting in the dark. I always say, I think I learned this in grad school way back, never embark on a marketing strategy or brand refresh without the research. It's so important. And so otherwise you are shooting in the dark, but it's become so much easier and cost effective to conduct research thanks to the many AI tools in the market. As for KPIs more specifically, at the highest level, at my company, SAIC, we look at the increase in brand relevancy, because we have to be relevant, right? Not just familiar, but relevant to the customer, and consideration over time. And so are we relevant, and are we considered in the buyer cycle? So these two metrics are so important that they're included in our CEO's corporate scorecard. However, we've identified and measured KPIs at really every level of the marketing funnel. So if you think about down funnel, like deal-based marketing, we're looking at marketing influence wins for customer-centric marketing, also known as account-based marketing, customer strength scoring, and those are just a few KPIs. There's many more. And then I group my marketing KPIs into three main categories, and those are brand. What are we doing at the brand level? And that really centers around that brand relevancy and consideration. Demand, right? And that gets to kind of the differentiation piece. And are we creating demand for our services and solutions? And finally, growth. And that is really about deal-based and those marketing influence wins. But also, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the important role that AI is doing in terms of transforming marketing KPIs from just simple performance tracking to advanced descriptive predictive and prescriptive analytics, and providing more accurate real-time insights and forecasting future performance. And so this is something that I'm strongly tracking as a CMO.
Okay, so many follow-up questions on that. That was fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so you talked about brand relevance and consideration. How are you currently tracking and measuring that right now? Are you doing that through like some survey tools and things of
We
that nature?
are. And so, yeah, it's a combination. It's a great question. So because it's costly, right, we do once a year, and that's about standard, once, twice a year to do a brand perception study. That has not gone away. That's both quantitative as well as qualitative. So typically we do customer focus groups, right? And then we use that to inform a survey that goes out to a larger, customer base that's statistically valid, et cetera. But we also look at our KPIs on a quarterly basis to see, are we moving the needle, particularly at the brand level, around relevancy and consideration. Those two being important. We have 5 metrics that we measure, but those two kind of rise to the top. So we do look at this at a quarterly basis. And then there's the typical KPIs, right? That I roll up into those 3 buckets I talked about earlier. Things like website visits, dwell time, engagement with our content, et cetera. And that all feeds into those larger buckets.
Okay. Interesting. Now, you mentioned AI playing a role through some predictive and forecasting models that you have. You've mentioned AI a couple of times, and I think we could probably talk about AI for 3 hours.
It's a whole webcast. Yeah.
We might want to. I might want to follow up with you and do another episode just where you talk. I'm super interested in how you use AI to do the rebrand. We might do a deep dive into that if you're okay with that.
Yeah.
But I'm for today, I want to talk a little bit about how you're using AI and measurement. So you mentioned you got some predictive stuff going on. Can you expand a little bit on how you're using AI right now in your measurement?
Yeah. And if I could, do you mind if I just back up? I think it'd be helpful to understand, and I just spoke at this at the North American Marketing Leadership Summit last week with a lot of big, Fortune 100 CMOs, in terms of how we're approaching AI as a marketing team and leading the effort. That might help back into then the KPIs, if that makes sense. If that's okay with you. So
totally,
so I was fortunate, and I think this is the benefit of being on the commercial side of things. I had an incredible leader at my previous Fortune 100 company before I took a role here, where I led marketing for AI and digital innovation. So you better believe when I came over here, the first thing I said was, we got to stand up an AI committee, right? And so across marketing communications, and I've got some incredible, my entire team is incredible, but some real leaders that have a lot of experience and passion for AI and coming from their previous jobs, some folks that I've hired on as well. And so we have stood up, really been able to turn what I would call constraints into a catalyst by building an AI first marketing function that's now, and I'm so excited about this, considered a trailblazer and serving as the company's model for transformation. So what I often say to other marketing leaders is, rather than simply playing catch up in the market, and this is what I told my CEO when I first started, I said, look, I did B2G years ago. I don't want to come back and just do it the same way. Having brought all the commercial learnings, particularly around AI, we can really do something different. And so bringing proven commercial best practices, customer-centric marketing, also known as ABM, deal-based marketing, AI integration into the government contracting marketing space. And we've seen tremendous success. So my AI committee, my marketing team has been the first to launch what we call 30 Days of AI, AI office hours, a Battle Buddies mentoring program. I'm a part of that program. I have a Battle Buddy, How Have I AI Today initiative. And I got to say, Drew, the enthusiasm is amazing. AI has served as an important retention strategy, which I'm so proud of, because so often I think, people go, oh gosh, AI is being inflicted upon me, whereas it can really empower the employee. I'm also proud that we have 100% adoption of AI amongst the marketing team. So instead of, again, being afraid of AI, my employees are really embracing it in their day-to-day work. Many have told me that they've learned more about AI at SAIC than anywhere else. And these are folks that have come from the largest tech consulting firms who are leading in AI. They're like, I've learned more here. And this has not been this is a big deal because SAIC's not had a really tried and true marketing before. So there were many skeptics when I joined. And so it's been a huge change management effort for me and my team, not just on how to leverage AI and kind of lead that transformation effort for the company, but we've had a lot of education to do. It's been worth it. I love turning skeptics into believers. I think it's the influencer in me. But in terms of how we're looking at KPIs, it's still pretty early days. But in addition to and I was just on a call on this today, actually, in addition to the traditional ROI, there's a lot of focus on efficiencies and productivity. And I get a little bit fearful if that's, well, I shouldn't say a little bit, quite fearful if that's all that the C-suite is focused on, particularly the CFO, because I really see it as augmenting the worker, right? And empowering the employee. And what I've seen in my team is it being really a retention strategy. Yes, it may eliminate some jobs, but it's going to create new ones. And we're already seeing that. And even just the conference I attended last week, the CMO for Microsoft, who leads AI and cloud, was phenomenal. And she said, it's really about unlocking creativity. And so we are doing the typical looking at, how many hours saved, what's the overall value. We're looking at traditional ROI, KPIs, but we're also looking at things like return on employee, which gets back to, are we really empowering the employee? To be able to take some of those mundane tasks off of their plate, right? That AI can handle so they can focus on more strategic work. So I think those are the types of KPIs, and there's still, we're still early in the process, but those are the types of things that I'm really looking for. And then to be able to go back and tell a really strong story about this is why. It's not just about productivity and efficiency. It's about taking marketing to a whole new creative level that we've never been able to do before.
Super interesting. Like I said, we could probably do a separate episode just about AI and
this
focus
is a whole
on that.
We can talk for an hour out here.
So are you using AI to help with analysis of marketing performance reporting, like ROI and, how marketing's influencing pipeline and deals and things like that? How are you kind of
still,
tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, great question. Still very early. So we are very early. So we did use it in our brand refresh. I think I mentioned we analyzed over 600,000 data points as part of the secondary analysis to inform the messaging. We are bringing on writer.com, which is piloting there. I'd used it in previous roles to help scale content production. I think the key thing, and I just spoke on this last week at this conference, is, it's easy as a CMO to get obsessed with the shiny new object. I mean, we all do, right? Oh, wow, that's so cool. But really the way I've approached it is, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And so I did a gap analysis, if you will, to say, okay, what are the 3 top areas? And this is what I encourage every CMO to look at. What are the top 3 areas where there are gaps that you need, and sometimes it's augmenting your team too. It's that blunt, right? But the 3 we discovered for us were quality content at scale. Number 1. Thus the reason writer, right, was really the first kind of where we're really investing. Another one is around market research, because, we're spending, marketers traditionally have spent thousands on market research and it takes months. So how can we help solve for that, right, with AI? And the third one is really around process workflows. What worked for us before I even came on board, when it was a smaller team, really didn't have as much tried and true marketing, those processes are antiquated, right? And so we need to evolve and modify to meet the current team's needs. And so those are the kind of 3 buckets that I've laid out as where we have problems we have to solve for. And that's how we determine our AI tool selection is really, there's so many great tools, but what are the ones that are most important for the problem you're trying to solve? Because at the end of the day, AI is an enabler, right? Like any other technology. So I think thinking of it that way is most important. Always start with strategy.
I think the thing that I really want to just double click on there is, you mentioned at the very end, start with strategy. And I think that's the part that most organizations skip that process. They see the shiny new object and they go,
Yeah.
I want to play with this new tool. I want to play with this new shiny object. Let's
Mhm.
buy
We
that and
all
then
do.
build a strategy based on that thing. And that's
Yeah.
the wrong way to look at it. We need to take a different approach, which is clearly
Yeah.
identify the challenge or the problem that we're trying to solve for, create the
Yeah.
strategy for how we're going to solve for that, and then find the technology that's going to best enable us to solve that problem most efficiently, most effectively, et cetera. And I think that it's important for folks, if you're listening to this podcast today, thank you. But if you are, no, you got to start with identifying the problem first, then build the strategy to solve it, then you pick the tool. And we
Yeah.
see this, like, anytime a new tool comes out, like AI is the hot thing right now.
Yeah.
Earlier this year, the end of last year, Clay was the big thing, was huge. It's still huge, but it was even, massive. A few years before that, you had 6sense and demand base that became the shiny new object. And,
Mhm.
right around that time, you also had drift and chatbots becoming shiny new objects. And everybody was just in such a rush to go buy those platforms to use them that what we ended up seeing, and this happens all the time, and I'm not picking on either of these platforms here. So if you're listening from 6sense or demand base, I'm not picking on you. But we see so many people that go and they buy 6sense and then they fail with 6sense. And then they're like, oh, well, it's the software problem. So now we're going to switch to demand base. And then they fail with demand base. And then they move to Terminus.
Yes.
And then they move back to 6sense again. And it's because you didn't start with the strategy. You started
That's
with
exactly
the
right.
tool versus the strategy.
Yeah, you were spot on. I mean, and that's exactly again what I talked about last week. I think it's easy to get into tool evaluation paralysis. Now, I do encourage experimenting, especially to increase adoption. And so, like, our 30 days of AI was very much about experimenting and learning because and my team in particular, and this is normal, right? I think with a lot of companies, you've got early adopters that are pretty advanced and you've got folks that just haven't really leveraged AI. And so I think particularly for those folks who haven't leveraged it much, we want to get them excited and show the art of the possible. Doesn't mean we're going to purchase or should purchase every tool, but see the art of the possible. And then what we say is, okay, now we've seen all these great products. What are we really trying to solve for? And then we came up with those three. So I think that's a really good way, especially if you're newer and you've got some folks, kind of across the spectrum of using AI tools. And so we've narrowed it down to those three. So now we're really aligning for the tools we bring on. They have to focus on those criteria. Now, down the road, we can't take advantage of it all right now. We don't have the infrastructure in place. We're not mature enough. But down the road, absolutely, we'll increase that. But I do think it's important to focus on quality versus quantity. Don't try to boil the ocean. Find out what is going to, at the end, thinking about technology as an enabler, what is going to help you solve for the problems that you've laid out are your top three. Doing that gap analysis, I think, is so important.
Well, I think just taking this back to like attribution and measurement, we're talking about, starting with a problem and then a strategy and then finding the tool that fits the need. It's the same approach that you have to take with reporting and attribution and measurement, because you have to understand, what are we trying, what attribution or reporting or measurement challenge do we have first? How do we resolve that? And then let's go buy some tools and software or services to enable that. Most people, again, they see a fancy new attribution tool or, a fancy new methodology like incrementality testing. I'm like, oh, we need that. It's like, you may not. Like, the name of my company is Attributo. We love attribution. We don't use attribution because it doesn't solve a problem that we have. So you have to make sure, again, same thing, like some organizations, organizations that are going heavy on brand, attribution, brand is a black box. It's a blind spot for attribution, click-based attribution. So if you're really heavily focused on brand for your marketing, your measurement solution is not going to be attribution. It's going to be something else. So you have to take that same approach to figuring out what type of a measurement strategy and solutioning you need and measurement tooling you need. Same approach. You can't just start buying tools.
Yeah, and that's going to be different for every organization, right? Depending on their maturity. There's some where they are in the maturity of curve of AI, what their needs are, even industry based, quite honestly. So I think, one of the things that's been helpful for me, I'm also a lot of some really wonderful peer exchanges and regularly attend and speak at conferences with other CMOs. So I know what's out there. And it's not that it doesn't interest me, but is it right today for me? Maybe not. Right? Because there's so much more we need to do to get there. But it also, and this is why I always encourage exploration. I don't want to say just look at tools because it may be, because right now I think you've got to think short term, here are our needs, but long term, where do we need to be? Right. And I think it's also important to look at other industries. As I mentioned earlier, B2C is usually like 10 years ahead. And then you've got, B2B, and then you've got B2G kind of trailing there. So looking and seeing, because it always ends up kind of trickling down. And so I'm very interested in those use cases. While they may not be something I can actually action on right away, I want to have my eye out for like what's coming down the pike so that I'm prepared. And particularly for AI, you've got to build with scale in mind, right? Knowing it's not a one and done. This is going to evolve. I mean, we're still early stages of AI, right? Gen AI especially. So we've got to build the foundation to be able to scale. So I do think it's still important to know what else is out there and how you might leverage what some of those use cases may be down the road. So don't confine yourself to the here and now, but don't get overwhelmed. I think look at what you immediately need to solve for when you're thinking about the tools you need to bring on.
Yeah, I think I'm starting to see and hear more about organizations that are attempting to future-proof
Yeah.
their marketing investments because
Yeah.
of, the how quickly AI is growing and becoming
Yeah.
adopted, that it's a good reminder for organizations to make sure that you aren't just focusing on what we need next quarter, but also, a year, 2 years down the road from a
Mm-hmm.
measurement and technology and tooling standpoint. You've got to future proof, because if you buy
You've
something
got to
today,
future proof,
yeah,
especially when it comes to the things like website SEO eventually going away to be replaced by EEO, GEO, whatever we want to call it at the end of the day. Um, those are things that are not going to wait. Like we've got to and I've got my team already thinking about that. And I today I said this on a meeting. I would rather be the first than the last to be thinking about that. And I think we've got such an incredible opportunity as CMOs to lead that transformation. And so it comes down to, do you want to lead the transformation or do you want it to happen to you? I know I would rather lead it, right?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, being proactive instead of reactive, right? We all want to be. It's a
Exactly.
lot better to be in a proactive position than a reactive position on things like
Well, and
this.
you might,
So
I mean, and I say to my team too, in the importance of adoption and why they need to be open to this no matter what their job. This saying we hear way too much, but it's very true. It's not that AI is going to put you out of a job, but a marketer that knows AI might. And I know it's a tiebreaker for me. If I've got, two very qualified marketers for a role, I'm going to pick the one who knows AI. Because that's the future. I'm hiring for positions sometimes that don't even exist yet. Right. We've got to be thinking that way. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind quickly because this AI, it's evolving so quickly. I think it was I adore Shelley Palmer. If you ever get to read, he's one of my favorites, know him personally. And he talks about, I heard him I have several lectures, but 2 years ago, he said, if I go to sleep at night and I'm already light years behind an AI. And he's a foremost expert on this topic as it relates to marketing. So we can't afford to not be thinking about it. I don't care what industry you're in. If you are not thinking about it as a CMO, you're going to become a dinosaur. And that's unfortunately the hard truth. So just something I think we all need to stay on top of, get ahead of. And again, I'd rather be a leader than a laggard in this area.
for anybody listening, if you are a job seeker, get up to speed on AI, because that's going to be a
Yeah.
differentiator in the job market if it isn't already. So just take that little gift from Marni and apply it to yourselves. Um, Well, Marni, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. We're running up on time here, and I don't want to take too much of your time. So what I'm going to do is we typically close these out with some key takeaways. So let's get into some of the key takeaways and things that I heard throughout the conversation that I think our listeners should really, really focus on. So number one is, and I agree with this, what you said wholeheartedly, is necessity is the mother of invention. I mean, when you are in a position where you have to adapt and change or you don't survive, well, adapt and change, you will. So, just keep that in mind, folks. Being customer-centric and focusing on one-to-one marketing can give a true competitive advantage, especially if you're in the B2G space, because not a lot of organizations are doing that right now. They're still, thinking about things, 5 years ago, B2B. When it comes to marketing strategy, if you don't have the data and research, you're just shooting in the dark. So you've got to make sure that you're doing the research ahead of time. AI can help with measurement more than what most people are using it for today. And I love this comment that you made, this phrase that you have, that AI turns constraints into a catalyst. And I love that because it really does. When we see constraints, we always think about, well, this is either going to make it really hard to do this thing or impossible to do this thing. And AI unlocks so many of those constraints and allows you to do things that we couldn't do before. Basically, so for any of our listeners that are thinking about how they can use AI, quality content at scale is one. Research, it's great at research. Process workflows, obviously, most people know that. But also, more importantly than any of this, is that you have to start by identifying the problem first, decide on the strategy, and then pick the AI tool that's going to best fit your particular use case. And along with that, when you're doing that analysis of picking that AI tool or any tool for that matter, you have to not just look at what you need to look at what you need to solve for immediately, but you also need to look down the road and make sure that you're future-proofing whatever solution that you're going to be buying today and make sure it's still going to be relevant a year, 2 years down the road, particularly with how quickly things are advancing on the AI side. Marni, again, thank you so much for joining. We really appreciate your time, and
Thank you, Gabe.
I loved hearing your thoughts, and I definitely think that there's a possibility of a second episode where we go deep into some of your AI use cases. I think that might be something really fun to do.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll have some really good ones in the next few months, so we'd love to circle back with you for sure.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining. For those that are listening, thank you for listening. Like, comment, subscribe, make sure you stay in touch with us and get the latest episodes. So thank you, everybody.